The Newsagents USA.
It shouldn't be about personalities, it should be about policy. And I think people are looking at that seriously, and that's why I'm convinced we're going to win.
I'm sure that you think that a policy debate would be better than a personality debate, but if President Biden had gone on stage and spoke about the size of a pro golfer's penis, I think you would be on this show right now saying you were shocked and appalled. The reason that Donald Trump is not up 10 points is because of comments like that one. Why is he talking about Arnold Palmer's penis in front of Pennsylvania voters?
Jake, you seem to like that line a lot. Let me tell you that Donald Trump is doing rallies nonstop around the country.
Let me just say something. I don't want to be talking about this.
Right.
Donald Trump is out there saying it. It is.
But you continue to. Let's talk about it.
That was the CNN anchor, Jake Tapper, asking the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, why Donald Trump was bringing up the penis of a dead golfer at his rally in Pennsylvania. This is where we have got to 2 weeks out from the US election. It is a whole new kind of crazy, but it doesn't seem to be hurting Donald Trump.
Yeah, he's also been talking about to women to get their fat slob husbands off their ass to go and vote. He's talking about Kamala Harris being shit as vice president. It sounds nuts, but is it possibly the case that it's winning him votes? Welcome to Newsagents USA. It's John.
It's Emily.
And, you know, we've heard a lot of this sort of stuff from Donald Trump over the 8-9 years that he's now been on the political stage. I would say it's becoming more a parody of itself than it used to be. It's become more exaggerated. The stories are more outrageous and perhaps epitomised. Perhaps the acme of it is Arnold Palmer's dick size, which kind of came out, he was in Pennsylvania.
Arnold Palmer, he's dead.
Not Arnold Palmer, but Arnold Palmer, great son of Pennsylvania. The local airport where he landed is Arnold Palmer Airport, just like we've got John Lennon Airport in Liverpool or whatever it happens to be. And this is what Donald Trump said to the audience in an anecdote that went on and on and on and on, but ultimately boils down to what a big schlong Arnold Palmer has.
It was all man, and I say that in all due respect to women, and I love women, but this is a guy that was all man. This man was strong and tough, and I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God, that's unbelievable.
It was a long rant. It was a long anecdote. And to put it in context, he's giving this rally in Latrobe, which is Arnold Palmer's hometown. And he goes off the autocue and just starts going on about what a wonderful golfer Arnold Palmer is. I don't think any autocue in the world would have had that anecdote down for Donald Trump to read. I think his whole team would have been going, yeah, you say a couple of nice lines about Arnold Palmer.
Do you think the autocue operator was just sitting there going,
frozen?
Oh my God,
like,
geez.
is it, do I go up? Do I see it? Down?
What do we do with this?
Exactly. Look, the best way of putting it is, if that was anyone else, right, you would be taking away the keys to their car, right? You would not put them in charge of a hairdryer. Quite frankly, you would not want them out loose on their own. And yet we are at a place where genuinely we're spending time deconstructing this because we think it might even be helping Donald Trump to win. And part of that, I guess, goes back to something that we all saw 8 years ago, which is that he has a different way of speaking than any other politician on earth. He has a folksiness to him. He has a humour to him. And you actually cannot miss the Trump humour. He is quite funny, not as funny as he thinks, but he is funnier than most politicians on the stage. And so what are you to make of the fact that as we're going into his third attempt to be president, won one, lost one, he is doing even more of this stuff. And it's gone even more kind of inside crazy. And the polls are absolutely tied, right? From what we can see, despite, whatever margin of error there is, they are not giving us a clear indication.
So I think my analysis of this would be that there are two things happening simultaneously. and one shouldn't distract the other.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is going on around the country, doing these rallies, doing crazy stuff, talking, mad stuff like this, which is not what his campaign team want him to be on. They don't want him calling Kamala Harris which is what he has done. They don't want some of the other stuff. But the advertising, the messaging, the targeting on social media, on TV ad spots is very rigid.
Yeah.
It's about immigration. It's the economy. Are we better off now than we were when I was president? No, we're not. So I think that there is a huge focus from the pros who are running his campaign. And I'm sure that those professionals would love him to be disciplined and stick to script and not go off auto cue and stay focused, but they know they can't control that.
Yeah,
so what they can control, the other variable that they can control is the
clips.
professional messaging that's going out, and they are doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I keep on being asked by people why Kamala Harris, and we talked about it a little bit last week, is not playing up his senility more, playing up the fact that he is now the 78-year-old in the race and Joe Biden's gone. And she did do that a bit in the Bret Baier interview that we discussed on last week's episode. But my sense is that he kind of out-crazies her insults on that. So actually, if he can be seen to be entertaining a crowd, the difference I think with Joe Biden was when he said something, when he made a gaffe, he kind of went, oh, okay, we've got to row back. Oh, I didn't mean that. Oh, I'm correcting myself. All the rest of it. I meant Egypt, not Mexico, whatever it was in the press conference. Donald Trump doesn't row back. He doesn't even pretend that he sort of regrets it. I mean, the cats and dogs thing being, a classic of the genre, let's say, that if you isolate that clip about Donald Trump talking about it being a shame that immigrants are eating people's cats and dogs, anyone else would be hanging their head in absolute shame, right? But he just doubles down and goes, well, yeah, no, of course it's happening. And most people who listen know it's not happening, but they kind of like the fact that he said it.
But then you see polling numbers supporting the mass deportation of illegal migrants, and never mind that the people he was talking about, never mind that in Springfield, Ohio, they weren't eating cats and dogs. Never mind that the Haitians who are living there are legal migrants, not illegal migrants.
The truth
That's
is not
irrelevant.
relevant.
The truth isn't relevant.
Yeah.
He appeals to the dark sense of that. Hey, presto,
Yeah.
people for the next week are on exactly the political territory where Trump wants them to be, talking about immigration and the broken border and all the rest of it.
At which point MAGA fans are going, oh, well done, you've caught up, right? I think the question is why Kamala Harris hasn't been able to make more of this. And my sense, and I think we did start to see this in the Fox News interview, is this complication with who she is. She put out a video a few months ago sort of saying, I used to work at McDonald's when I was a student. We talked about it at the time. It's not a big deal. It doesn't make you working class. It doesn't make you understand the average, blue-collar worker in Pennsylvania because you did a summer job when you were at college in McDonald's. Frankly, we've all done those kind of jobs. And Donald Trump goes one further and goes, I'm going to put on the McDonald's uniform. I'm going to become Donald McDonald, go inside the little, drive-through. And he makes a big thing saying, I think I've worked at McDonald's 15 minutes longer than Kamala Harris.
She specifically worked at the French fry, where they make the French fries, and she talked about the heat. It was so tough. She never worked at McDonald's. Never touched by a human hand. Nice and clean. This is fun. I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again. Thank you. It's Kamala's birthday. She's 60 years old. Maybe I'll get her some fries. You're right. That might be. I'll give her some McDonald's. I'll get her a McDonald's hamburger. Happy birthday, Kamala.
Donald Trump absolutely delighted, as we heard there, that nobody touches the French fries with their bare hands. Well-known germaphobe. Delighted that there is an arm's length approach to sanitation at that particular McDonald's. But just the fact that he can sort of turn the whole thing, his art form is mimicry, really, right? And she doesn't have an answer for that. And she hasn't quite worked out how to bring the conversation back onto the areas that really ought to matter to people, like, you know, wages and jobs and healthcare and, you know, lowering the price of insulin and sort of bringing inflation down after the Ukraine war sent up and the jobs that Biden has created under the infrastructure plans. Those all ought to be tripping off her tongue the whole time.
Look, everything we're describing is Donald Trump the entertainer.
Yeah.
Is Donald Trump serving up portions of fries at McDonald's? I mean, of course, the whole place had been shut down. It wasn't just serving surprising customers. The customers had been pre-screened who would get a portion of fries from Donald Trump. So let's not pretend it was a normal day at McDonald's where Donald Trump turns up and suddenly takes over flipping the burgers. No, that wasn't what was happening at all. It was Donald Trump as entertainment. The Donald Trump rallies are entertainment. People go to have a laugh. They're not going for serious messages about the macroeconomic circumstances of the United States of America and what's going to happen next with the Federal Reserve. They're going there to be entertained by someone who tells long, rambling, off-colour stories, the likes of which normal politicians cannot do.
So what is happening? Okay, we're not going to kind of call the election at this stage because we're 2 weeks out from that. And all we're saying is that the polls are so closely tied that it could go either way. But given that Kamala Harris had that, you know, really quite visible poll bounce and sort of energy bounce in the summer, the brat summer, what is happening now? And I guess the question I keep coming back to is, why are people coming back to Donald Trump having voted him out of office once? And the thing that makes most sense to me is that he is just much better at not being the incumbent, right? So he fights a much better ground game from a place of opposition.
Yeah.
And that he can carry on saying to her, you failed at this as vice president. You didn't bring immigration numbers down. You didn't bring inflation numbers down. You know, you started foreign wars, even though obviously they didn't. He can fire things at her as being part of the Biden administration because he's always happier being the outsider. What happened, of course, in 2020...
Or the victim.
Or the victim, right? In 2020, he was the one who'd screwed everything up, right? Terrible, you know, tragic COVID figures.
Very mixed messaging over kind of
Everything.
keeping your distance, about vaccinations,
Yeah,
about
and also
masks.
not having done anything on the things he said he would, whether it was immigration or infrastructure or
manufacturing jobs.
all the rest of it. But I think he couldn't win that election from the inside. Now he is trying to fight. He's trying to fight against her incumbency, and she hasn't done enough yet to put distance between old Biden administration and new Kamala Harris.
I suppose the thing I find remarkable about it and the state of the race. Look, Harris overnight made the race competitive, and no one had seen that coming when Joe Biden was still in the race. It looked like it was heading towards a blowout victory for Donald Trump on November the 5th. Harris comes into the race and boom, there's a huge boost, and the race is competitive. It wasn't before. So, but what she hasn't been able to do is push on from that.
Seal the deal.
Seal the deal. What's amazing to me, and I was asked about this the other day, was, you know, someone said to me, did you believe after November 2020, January the 6th, the second impeachment, and the prosecutions, that Donald Trump would be in a position to be competitive in 2024? No, I didn't think he would. I thought he would be dead in the water. And that is the kind of aspect of Donald Trump where he just defies the laws of political gravity in a way that no one else I've ever seen does, and is able to turn these things into a strength. That they're trying to pull me down, that the courts are trying to do me, the weaponized justice system. This is lawfare.
So Kamala Harris is trying to bring on side Republicans that will never vote for Trump, the never Trumpers, if you like. 2 weeks ago, we heard an endorsement from Liz Cheney, a woman who'd been pretty much hounded out for standing up to Trump over the Jan 6th impeachment.
And who was a Republican congresswoman in Wyoming.
Who was very conservative, who had supported Trump in many aspects of his policy until the point where she realised he didn't believe in democracy. And Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney on the campaign trail together this week. And Liz Cheney, who is a die-hard sort of anti-abortion voice, has now kind of shifted her message to say it's okay to go with Kamala Harris with her position on abortion. Have a listen.
I'm pro-life, and I have been very troubled, deeply troubled, by what I have watched happen in so many states since Dobbs. And I have been troubled by the extent to which you have women who, as the Vice President said, in some cases have died, who can't get medical treatment that they need because providers are worried about criminal liability. We're facing a situation today where I think that it's an untenable one. And I think that...
Look, Liz Cheney is making a very clear point there, the difference between sort of, abortion without limit and saving women's lives. But there's still something that is, I think you'd have to recognise, slightly unsettling for Kamala Harris being on the same stage as Republican women that she wouldn't naturally share any ground with apart from their sort of hatred of Donald Trump. And if you look at her campaign strategy over the last week, and this is, I have to say, John King from CNN, who is like the master at all this stuff, has been tracking the places where Kamala Harris is speaking now. And they are in the parts of the swing states where Nikki Haley, in the primaries days, was getting between 20-25 percentage points in the vote. So this is where the Harris strategy is now. She's trying to win over the Haley voters, the people who didn't really like Trump in the first place, who she thinks might lend her a Republican vote for now. Liz Cheney fits into that category. But it is a harder case to make. It's a harder case for Kamala to prosecute of what kind of politician she is if she's now appealing more to the right of America.
Look, you are trying to win over that tiny sliver of undecided America, biddable America, whatever you want to call them, the floating voter. And to have Liz Cheney there to say, it's okay, it's safe to vote Democrat, I'm voting Democrat.
I'm giving you permission.
I'm giving you permission, even though we've clearly got our differences. Broadly, I think it's smart politics. Why wouldn't you? But there is another view of, oh my God, what is Kamala Harris doing with Liz Cheney? This is the one and only Jon Stewart.
What the f***? That's a Cheney. What are you doing with a Cheney? You're not allowed to hang out with a Cheney. They're Marvel. You're DC. You can't be in the same movie. It's a rights issue. And no one likes them.
Yeah, I mean, look, he kind of puts his finger on the pulse, which is, of course, Democrats want Kamala Harris to win any way she can. But they have got to kind of hold their noses on this one. I mean, personally, I think Liz Cheney is an absolute hero. I think she's a hero of America for being able to cross the floor, to fight for democracy at a time when many in her party just let Donald Trump say whatever he wanted, do whatever he wanted, pretend he'd won an election that he'd lost. I personally don't have a problem with that. But I think it plays to a bigger question, which is, who is Kamala Harris standing for now? Like, where is her messaging? Is it just that she's picking off, as you say, 1,000 people in Wisconsin or, 50 mums here in Michigan because they like Nikki Haley? It's not as clear and as simple a message as the one that Donald Trump is offering maybe to the, as you say, the auto workers of Michigan who just go, hey, he's a funny guy, he makes me laugh.
Yeah, I think that's a sort of interesting analysis. I think that, Harris is doing it by maths.
Yeah.
She's doing, if I've got 48% here of Democrats and what I need is 49.5% to get myself over the line, there is 1.5% of Republicans who perhaps I could get. And if I've got, Liz Cheney by my side, that's not a bad thing. I think the remarkable thing, to be honest, and Liz Cheney stood up for the US Constitution.
Yeah.
She said, my loyalty first is to the processes of the US Constitution, not to Donald Trump, who can't accept that he's lost the election. Where are all the other people,
of course,
who believe exactly as Liz Cheney does that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy? Where are all the other people that, if they had a bit of backbone between them, would be coming out in public and saying these things too? We all know they think it. We all know that the generals who served in Donald Trump's administration, Jim Mattis, the defense secretary, John Kelly, others, where are they now?
Yeah.
And it's quite striking how so many have chosen the easy life rather than doing what Liz Cheney has done, which is to say, enough. I'm putting my head above the parapet. We can't have Donald Trump back.
In a moment, we will be talking about the closeness of the polling and trying to read the runes with somebody whose job is to let us into their secrets.
I'm delighted to say we are joined now by Garrett Herring, and he's the CEO and publisher of Vote Hub, which is a non-partisan tracker of election results and polls. And Garrett, thank you so much for being with us on News Agents USA. A very simple question to kick off with. Where the hell are we now?
Well, it is a wild ride here. Right now, the election, I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of your guests, it's tied here. We really don't have much of an idea of where this is going to go. A lot of people are looking to early voting because the polls are telling us the same thing. The forecasts are telling us the same thing, that it is a tied race. So at Vote Hub, we are tracking the early voting in the battleground states, and the picture is also a little unclear. So if you're a Democrat, you can see some good in the early voting numbers. If you're a Republican, you can see some good in the early voting numbers. The reason why is for Republicans, they are voting early at a much higher rate than they voted in 2020 and 2022. But at the same time, in 2020, the then president was telling his supporters not to vote by mail, to vote on election day. And that is not the strategy the Republican Party is taking this time. So there are going to be fewer Republicans to vote on election day now. From the Democrats' point of view, they are still ahead in the early vote, still, performing pretty well. Turnout is pretty high in deep blue cities like Detroit and Philadelphia. So, if either party is seeing some good in the early voting numbers, and we'll see what it looks like with the election day vote.
Garrett, when you're looking at the queues in Georgia, for example, on the first day of early voting there, in the olden days, let's say 4 years ago, 8 years ago, you would have assumed it was Democrats going out to vote early. Now you're just not making those kind of predictions, right?
Georgia has 159 counties, and the top counties for turnout are in deep red Republican areas where Donald Trump got over 70% of the vote. So we are seeing at a statewide level that the electorate is more diverse. Women are voting at a higher rate than they did in the early voting in 2020. But Georgia is kind of unique right now among the swing states, and the turnout has been very high thus far. And, in the past, Democrats have been the beneficiaries of high turnout. And that may not necessarily be the case this time because, a lot of lower propensity voters, are going toward the Republicans now. The parties have kind of switched.
I heard a stat, which you will know better than me, which was that the Democrats hadn't lost a significant election since the Dobbs case. In other words, since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. A presidential election's obviously a very different thing. But when you see turnout is up for women in these states, do you assume that it is abortion driving that, or is there no evidence that that's going on?
It may be abortion that is driving it, but, because all we have to go on right now is the early vote, we know that women, in this case, skew Democratic, men skew Republican, and Democrats are higher propensity right now. So, they're the ones who are disproportionately doing the early voting. We see that in states where there is, partisan registration. And so if all we had to go on was early voting, then, I think that Democrats would be pretty enthused by what they're seeing. But we just don't know what that looks like come election day.
Mm-hmm. And it's just worth adding for people who are not quite as sad as Emily and me, and I'm not going to say, Garrett, you're sad, you're brilliant. But, Georgia was won last time round with a majority of 11,780, as we well know, on the basis of nearly 5 million people voting. So, oh my God, wafer thin majorities. And I want to talk about Arizona, because actually Arizona won by a similar margin. In Arizona, as I understand it, and tell me if I've got this wrong, that there is a proposition on the ballot about abortion rights, and that there are large numbers of women who are voting for a woman's right to choose on abortion, but are not necessarily voting for Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket.
That's right. That's right. We're seeing that in not just Arizona. There are other states that have abortion rights on the ballot. Florida, which is where I live, has abortion on the ballot, and 60% is required in order for that amendment to pass. And in all the polling that we've had, it looks like that is on track to pass. But in no public polling have we seen Donald Trump ahead here. So we have seen this in election after election where, voters vote on progressive policy when it comes to, ballot initiatives and amendments, but then they turn around and, vote the other way for, the top of the ticket. Voters are fickle. It is what it is.
So people split their ticket, as they say.
Fickle or sophisticated, right? This is a very sophisticated way of voting now, where, I'm looking now at a ballot paper that we've been introducing our listeners to. And honestly, in this country, I've never seen anything like this. You have to tick it, 60 times maybe? The legislatures, the school playground, the Justice Fifth Court of Appeals District. Everything. So you're asking a lot of people, right? And I guess the question that we seem to be asking more and more in this election is about the sort of enthusiasm gap and whether people are getting off the couch. And the question that nobody has asked yet is whether more Democrats are really getting off the couch for Kamala Harris than would have done for Joe Biden. Or do you think her gender, her sex, is making some stay at home?
That could be the case. I hope it's not. At least for that reason. Democrats have to be happy that they aren't in the situation that they have been in the vast majority of this election cycle, with an unpopular president at the top of the ticket, where consistently in poll after poll, Republicans were the ones who by far most enthusiastic to vote in this election. In many public polls, that has flipped, where Democrats are now more enthusiastic or just as enthusiastic. And that's how we've seen, in some of the public polling after the first presidential debate when Joe Biden was still in the race, Democrats were down 6, 7, 8 points in the national popular vote. And it's rare these days to have a public poll where Democrats are down in the popular vote. So they've made up a lot of ground.
I remember in 2016, Hillary Clinton feeling frustrated and to some extent blaming sort of the misogyny of American voters for her not winning the presidential election, which I frankly always thought was a bit far-fetched because I thought she ran a lousy campaign. But you can see it in Michigan, which is ever so tight, where you've got a huge number of auto workers who are saying, yeah, you know what, she laughs too much, or I don't like the way she does this. And you kind of think, well, maybe this is a factor in this election as well.
What's interesting is right now she is not running a campaign that is based on identity politics at all, and she has every right to. She would be the first woman president the United States has had. She, would be the first Indian American president. She first Black woman president, and yet that is not something that she has accentuated on the campaign trail or made an issue when she's been asked by the press about this, about Donald Trump's comments toward her race. She has demurred and said, that she's not going to engage in it. And so I think that may be a lesson learned from the Democrats, not to focus too much on that on the campaign trail. That if they do, like you said, some of these voters, particularly men in the Rust Belt, could be a little turned off by it. So I think that is an intentional campaign strategy.
And do you think that she is losing what I'm going to call the macho vote, whether it's, Latino men or Black men or sort of young men more generally, who still find Trump's kind of, projected sense of strength a turn on?
I think that could very well be the case. Right now we are seeing that Trump is doing pretty well, relatively well with Latino voters, with Black voters, but that's disproportionately concentrated with men. In Florida, for instance, back in 2020, this was a state that had a 3-point margin at the presidential level. Right now, in VoteHub's averages, Donald Trump is leading by 8 points. And one reason for that is here in Miami-Dade County, where I am, there is, it's anticipated that there's going to be kind of a significant Latino swing to the right. And that's not just going to be concentrated in Florida, more than likely. There are high populations of Latino voters who are concentrated in places like, Nevada and Arizona, also really critical, important battlegrounds. And so, I think that this is something that the Harris campaign knows that they have to work on, and their recent, media appearances kind of show that that's the case.
I want to ask you about the state of the polls generally, because some people are saying, well, what we're seeing now, there was the initial flurry of support for Kamala Harris, but Trump has clawed it back and Trump is edging ahead. It seems to me that everything is within the margin of error. That you could say, well, do you know what? Actually, this is like a First World War battle where you're scrapping over a muddy piece of field and no one is making any real progress in any direction.
Well, if we look at what's been happening in the state polls and the national polls, Kamala Harris has actually had pretty consistent support since she has joined the race in late July. She has seen her support kind of level off at around 49% of the vote. And what's happened is not necessarily that she's lost her support, is that Trump has consolidated a lot of his support. Now, he's gone up to around 47%. And at least for right now, it looks like he's kind of topped off. And I think that that's because, a lot of independent voters who are undecided are late breaking. This is something that if you're the Trump campaign, you want to see. This is the time to have some momentum. In the past 4 weeks, Donald Trump has gained in our polling averages in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania anywhere from 1 to 2.5 points. So we'll see if that sustains itself or if that polling is correct. But this is a position that is new to Donald Trump. Back in 2020, he was down in these states by 4, 5, 6 points. In Wisconsin, he was ahead even more. And I think one thing that we aren't talking about that we have to be open to is the idea that there is polling error this election. So, we're saying that this election is very close, and that's what the polling averages are showing right now consistently. But the polling averages also showed consistently in 2020 that it was going to be a blowout for Joe Biden. Now, that's not to say that it's going to be a blowout this year for Donald Trump. Polling error doesn't always favor one party or the other, and pollsters have, tried to make some adjustments so that they're accounting for the shy Trump voter. But it could very well be the case that whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, we see a relative electoral college landslide where one of the candidates just happens to be the beneficiary of that polling error in each of the 7 battleground states.
If I held a gun to your head and said Harris or Trump on November the 5th, would you say Harris, Trump, or pull the trigger? I
don't think I should answer that question. And really, that's because I don't know the answer myself. I think that when I do kind of buy that the odds are 50-50 right now in either direction, but by its very nature, 50-50 means that the ball is going to move on either side of that 50-yard line. And so, week to week, at least my, personal thoughts on this fluctuate. And so right now, I couldn't tell you if someone says that they are confident that they know what the result's going to be, they're likely lying to you because we just don't know right now. We don't have enough information. We aren't, I think, going to have enough information until Election Day comes to pass.
Garrett Herron, brilliant to speak to you. Really appreciate that. It's really illuminating. Thank you so much. We're not going to shoot you either way.
We're not going to shoot. I would never have pulled the trigger.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Okay, I didn't really expect him to bite on that question. I thought earlier, Mateless, your point about Kamala Harris going to the areas where Nikki Haley did well is a really interesting one and a really shrewd observation. There is still all the talk of whether Donald Trump is going to bring her into the campaign for the final 2 or 3 weeks. And I can't help thinking
he doesn't need to.
No, I think he does. I think it would be a smart thing to do to get, if Liz Cheney is peeling off Republicans that don't like the cut of Donald Trump's jib and that they're going to Harris, get Haley alongside you, and that's a reassuring figure. I just think Donald Trump's pride prevents him from reaching out and saying, hey, Nikki, I could really do with some help.
I think it's so interesting. I mean, look, there will be a post-mortem on the polling. I think whatever the result of this election, because for 8 years, we've always thought that the Trump voter was underpriced. In other words, shy Trumpers, quiet Trumpers, people voting for Trump but not admitting it. If the pollsters haven't adjusted to that third time round, frankly, what on earth are they doing? So there is the possibility that, yes, the Trump vote's still underpriced and that he wins quite easily. There is also the possibility that they have now adjusted and they are so conscious of the Trump vote that they're underestimating Harris, who's actually, several points ahead. And there is also the possibility, the worst one of all, really, is that this does end up in a tie. And this is why every single electoral college vote matters. And one of the funniest answers to a kind of, listener question that I heard came from David Axelrod, genius, who said, when people come up to me, Democrats, bedwetters, saying, what can I do? What can I do? I think Trump's going to get in. He just says to them, move to Omaha. Now, Omaha, as some of you will know, the nerds will know, is the sort of main Democrat stronghold of Nebraska, which splits its electoral college vote. So a lot of Nebraska goes Republican, Omaha can go Democrat. And he's basically saying, if you actually want to do something useful, shift your vote to Omaha. That is the best way of making sure this doesn't end in a dead heat or a tie.
Yeah, and David Axelrod was the guy, of course, who ran Obama's campaign in 2008.
He kind of knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. I know someone in London who's voting in the US and is voting in Omaha. That's where she's from. I'm not entirely sure it's the last place this person lived, so there's a kind of slight dodge element to this, but I think that anyone who can vote in Omaha is trying to vote in Omaha.
Before we go, I'm holding in my hands a real live, photocopied, but of a real live American ballot, which came in from our editor. And I'm just
Are you a Texan? Are you a Texan now, Maitland?
I'm not a Texan, but I'm seeing what Texans have to go through every time they vote. And I'm just going to count this up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 30.
This is like
37.
listening to Eliza, my granddaughter,
37.
counting.
There are 37 boxes for you to tick when you go to vote in Texas. And it is everything from who do you want for president to the Justice 5th Court of Appeals District Place 10. There is even one, I kid you not, about the resurfacing of a playground. This is the Allen Independent School District for repairing and resurfacing the athletics track at Lower Freshman Centre and Curtis Middle School. I mean, you get a vote on that in Texas.
And the other thing, just, if you're used to voting in UK general elections, when we get to vote, if it's the same day, well, we don't no longer have European elections, but if it's the same day as the local council elections, we'll get a ballot paper for who we want as our local MP, and then we'll get a ballot paper for who we're going to vote for the council. All done and dusted. Here, you vote for absolutely everything, and obviously the ballot paper.
If you don't get into power in Texas, you're really on your own.
And so the top of the ballot is, do you want Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? And the bottom is, do you want the school playing field resurfaced?
Incredible.
And people split their votes all manner of ways, or don't fill the ballot paper in completely because they think, I don't know, I've got no idea who any of these people are, apart from the people at the very top of the ballot.
But the truth is, some of the text is really tiny, and you might miss something absolutely critical. In Florida, in Arizona, there are questions over abortion rights for women, right? As well as the presidential nominee. So if you miss something like that, you've kind of,
I've seen ballot papers that are more or less 3 feet long.
Yeah.
I mean, they just go on and on and on, and you feed it into a machine. It is nuts. And every county, every state has different electoral rules.
And you spend a long time in a queue.
And you spend a huge amount of time in a queue. But we are going to be in the US for the final week of the campaign, and we'll be doing it every day. And we hope you will be with us, because it is going to be one hell of a ride. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
See you then and there.
Bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents USA.